Welcome. Like Jarno said first, I'll start with an apology because we did forget to introduce ourselves. I'm sorry about that. I know that's really rude. By process of elimination, I'm the third in this group. You've met Jarno and Robert already. My name is Roger Sheen. I'm responsible for the documentation in the toolkit. And I'm here to talk today just a little bit about what's changed in the documentation. Fortunately enough, not much has changed. So this will be a quick talk, and I'll get us back on schedule, and you'll get your break. So if you're getting nervous whether you can wait until the break or not, I think you can. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about what's changed. I'll give you a few statistics, and it's break time. So, what's new? At, I believe, this conference last year, one of the features that sort of snuck in was another configuration file that you can use to set some things for your toolkit installation. And there's always been something like that. There's been the configuration properties file, there's been the local properties file, but I'm going to introduce another one called the DDoTRC file, DDoTRC, sorry, hard to pronounce. And that can live in various folders in the hierarchy, like other tools have configuration files that can be nested, so that you can have one sort of global one that applies everywhere, and one that applies to all the things in that subdirectory, and then one in a particular subdirectory of that. We now have that approach as well. So there's a tiny little topic that explains how that works. There's not much to it, but that's one little new bit of information. And then Jarno's been talking about changes to the PDF themes. And we've split that up a little bit now because with the support for Bookmap, there are many more elements that are supported in these themes. So we decided to split that up to make it a little bit more readable. So there's just a section on block elements and another one on inline elements. So it's, you'll find it in the same place as before, just a little bit more structured now. And I think we sorted it better. We'd had it kind of grouped thematically in the past, but that made it difficult to find things if you were looking for a particular element. So super simple change. There's a slightly new navigation structure that I'll walk you through, and there's some changes to samples that Jarno alluded to. So the most interesting thing perhaps is that you might remember if you were here last year, I talked a little bit about realizing that over the years, the documentation has grown and grown and grown. And we've kept adding things, but we didn't always adjust the structure. And so we were beginning to think that there were just maybe too many things on the top level. And so we decided maybe we need to start merging that a little bit to make the top level structure of the documentation a little bit more understandable. And there are some things here that may be a little bit contentious, of course. When you're putting things in buckets and things have multiple attributes, and you start to sort buckets by attribute, and you say this thing has two attributes. Do I put it in the bucket with that attribute or in the bucket with that attribute, right? So any one of you that does information architecture work knows that this is a messy business. So you may not agree with these choices, and that's okay. You can open issues and say, I think you put that topic in the wrong place. If you fight it out in the issue comments, I'll do what the majority says. It's okay. But no, it's a pretty simple thing. All the content is still there. Just on the top level, there are a few different things before. So we had a bunch of general things that are sort of about the release. So the release notes, what can this tool do? What import formats does it accept? How many different output formats can you generate with this thing? That all just moved into the top level section just called Toolkit 4.3 because that's what this version of the toolkit can do. So that was the thinking there. The installing and the building part are all still there because that still works exactly the same way. I just sort of turned the word building into publishing because it's always been a very developer-centric approach. We are going to build. But I'm not sure whether writers always think of it that way. It's like, I want to publish something. So that's just a minor terminology change. Everything is still there. And all of the old links still work. So if you are someone who has like browser bookmarks, or you've shared on an email list, or in your style guide at your company, you have a link to an old topic, and I renamed the topic, don't worry, the link is still going to work. I have redirects set up for everything that got renamed. So you'll still find it in the same place. Probably the most complex part and the biggest part of the documentation are the chunks in the middle. Sorry, I said the word chunk in a way that wasn't the DITA way. Anyhow, the problem is if I say part, then it's also not the DITA way. But anyhow, the thing is, if you want to make this thing work the way you want it to, there are different ways of doing it, right? In some cases, you can just change some settings and it will do what you want because there are lots of settings. And then there are other ways, other places where you have to actually make a plugin. And that has been really confusing for people over the years. So at some point, people kind of had the impression that, oh my God, in order to make things work like I want, I have to build a plugin. And I don't know how to make a plugin because I'm not a developer. And in my mind, that was always kind of a false distinction because there are a lot of things that you really can do without making a plugin. So what's happened now in the table of contents there in the navigation is that there's just 2 blocks now, and I realize we may need to refine these names. With your help, we can refine them even more. There's one section now just called configuring that says these are all the settings you can change to make this thing do what you want. So when you're passing a command on the command line, you can say do it the other way, and it'll work the other way. So what was in the past the parameters section and the section about customizing your HTML output, that was always about customizing your HTML output by changing parameters. That wasn't about building plugins, right? And we did the same thing with PDF. There was a way to customize PDF by changing some settings. And all of those things that you just do by changing settings are now in what's called configuring. It's all still there. And all of the plugin related stuff, adding, removing, creating plugins, all those use cases and everything, that's just now in a thing called extending. And I realize there's some ambiguity there between customizing and extending, so bear with me. If anyone has better ideas, I'm very, very open to those. But this is the way we started. And you may recall, if you were here last year, that one of the reasons that we're thinking about this is the whole navigation is pretty complex. And so we're thinking about maybe somehow we might want to find a way to simplify that. So if you're looking at the list of parameters, maybe that's all you want to see. And maybe you're the person that all you do is configure this thing all day. So just show me that section of the hierarchy and let me ignore all that other stuff. Maybe you're a writer who says, I will never build a plugin in my life, so just make that stuff go away. So we did a little example last year of like having another sort of menu bar that would allow you to go into parts, and then in those parts you would get that part of the documentation navigation. And we're still thinking about that, so the step was kind of just to simplify that. So that's what that's about. You'll still find everything, for the most part, in the same place, just under a slightly different label. The search box still works, so that's that. Okay, that's probably the biggest change. Trivia question. Does anybody remember these people? Yeah? Okay, who knows who they are? Oh, come on, more hands? No more hands? Okay, a few more hands, good. So these are from what was called the garage samples, which were samples that shipped with the toolkit since the early days. I joined later in the process, in the project's history, so I can't say from the start, but just kind of a trivia question for the audience. Does anyone know where the garage samples came from? Does anyone know who authored them, when they were introduced? There's someone sitting in the back row that wrote, I wrote those. No? Okay. Anyhow, they were of limited utility nowadays because they were created at a time when, you know, it was before Data 2.0, it was before Data 1.3, it was before Data 1.2, it was before Data 1.1. It may have even been before Data 1.0, I don't even know, right? But they were so trivially simple that we began to question whether they're useful for people. And when I'm doing sort of updates and search and replace and like, you know, how do we make sure that everything is consistent, I realize I'm changing these old files, but they're useless, right? So at some point we questioned whether they would actually be useful to anyone. And so I threw them out. They're gone. But that's the sort of bad news, good news thing. They're gone. But they're not completely gone. You remember hearing Jarno talk about the init plugin earlier today. While we were thinking about use cases for this init plugin, one of the ideas that we had was, well, let's just ship with the DittoOpen toolkit the universal example of how you should structure your project so that everyone can just get started the right way. And then we opened up a discussion on GitHub to sort of say, why don't you tell us what you think is the right way to structure a project? And the silence was deafening, right? Because all of you do it a different way. And we kind of realized, maybe this is a silly idea. Should we just scrap this feature and get rid of it because we can't tell anybody how to structure things? But then we realized, no, that's actually not the right way to go about it. Everyone still has this problem. I bet you have a template at your company that if you have 5 products and you now have a 6th product, you probably don't start from scratch. You probably have something that says, this is how we start the documentation for a new product of ours. So we said, maybe we should make it easy for you to insert that. And then we realized, wait a minute, we're throwing out these examples and we're moving them out to the garage in the sense that we can get to them if we need them. They're still there. But you can bring them back. And the way that you can bring them back is with the init plugin. So now, if for some reason you realize that you need those old garage samples, you can type on your command line, command, we learned from Jarno earlier today, subcommand, init, initialize, right? Samples is the name of the template, and where would you like them to go? And if you'd like them to go back to the old place, you just say doc source samples where they lived before, and they will reappear. So it's really not exciting. It's just a way of demonstrating how the init command works, basically. We took something away and tell you how to put it back. And the interesting thing is it doesn't bunny stomp everything else that's in the samples folder. So if you don't have files with those names, these will just be added to that folder hierarchy. So we didn't get rid of the samples folder. There's still all sorts of useful things in there. Properties files, project files, CSS examples, stuff like that. We just threw out the old stuff, and when you press this button, it comes back and it gets added to what was there before. So it's really simple. One of the things that I realized as we were working on the release was that, of course, we need to explain to people how to do this and how to add new samples of their own. But last week there was a lot of stuff to get done before this conference, so there isn't yet a new topic about how to add your own samples. I promise there will be, and it will be short, because doing this is basically a one-line plugin. So it's really simple, and I don't want to bother you with code samples because they're usually hard to read, but in this case, this is the complete change that I had to make to get rid of the samples and to get them back in. This is a plugin that has a plugin.xml file that has one line that is added to what was there before, and it says feature extension equals init template. That's a new extension point. And the description that you saw on Jarno's slide earlier, garage samples and ant build scripts, that comes from here. I wrote that in this one line. And all it does is say, take this folder called samples and insert it in the list of templates that are available in the toolkit, right? So there's one folder that contains some stuff, and over here in the folder hierarchy for this change, we see there's a samples folder and a bunch of subfolders and files. That's it. It's as easy as that. So if somewhere on your shared drive at your company you have this is the starter folder that everyone should use when they create a new project, take that, put it in the plugin. You can either submit that plugin to the registry if it would be useful to others, or just keep it in your company and say, install corp examples, and then that's it, you're done. So that's it. That's pretty much it. Those are the sort of changes, right? It's not all that much. So since we're strapped for time and we're running over a little bit, I won't go through in great detail a few of the other things that I have here, but I will share just a couple of quick things. I have a few statistics for you because some people are curious about how often this thing gets used or whatever. We've had roughly 50,000 visitors to the project website. We track that with a non-sort of invasive tool that doesn't collect any personal information, so don't worry when you visit the site, we still don't know who you are, but we're still curious to know if someone visits the site. I'll walk you through a couple of other statistics. I can share this with you in more detail if you're interested later on. Remarkably enough, the most visited page on the website is the download page, so yay for downloading the toolkit. The error message topic is popular. The Markdown data syntax reference is popular. There's a few other ones that we wouldn't have quite expected, but I see that some of you do read the release notes, so thank you. That makes me happy. Most of our users are on desktop. Very few people visit the site on a phone. Almost no one visits it on a tablet, which is not entirely surprising either. Yeah, a remarkable number of our visitors are from the States. Second to India, right? So lots of Indian developers working with the toolkit nowadays. Germans are still pretty strong. So just trivia, but And also trivia, because I know some people appreciate this sort of trivia, we have the search box on the site. What do people look for most? So this is the top 10, right? Chunk is currently leading the list of things that people look for, because apparently by topic is confusing, and maybe split would be nicer, or who knows, whatever. This is not super representative. This is just the last 3 months. So when I checked on the way over, I had access to just 3 months of data and not a year. Markdown is tied for second place in the sense that it's stable in second place. It was second place last year too. So that's still quite popular. Ditaval is trending downward. It was the top search term a year ago, and now it's only number 3. So whatever. Anyhow, trivia. But what's interesting to us, perhaps, is how often this thing gets downloaded. So there's a fairly stable average over the years. Roughly 10,000 people download each release cycle. And it's been that way for a couple of years now. I've done these statistics slides for a couple of years. So individual patch builds get maybe more or less downloads, but that's kind of the rough average there. And for a couple of years now, we've had the opportunity to install the toolkit through a package manager called Homebrew. That happens about 1,000 times a year as well. So it's interesting to see how people choose to access the toolkit. And some of you may remember that a while ago we realized that we had just a huge number of open issues that weren't getting attention, where people had filed an issue years ago, no one was really sure whether it actually is still true or not. And so we realized we're kind of struggling with a load of issues. So this is just an overview of the number of issues over time. This is 2012 over here, and this is 2025 over here. And the big cliff here is 2019, when we decided to kind of declare issue bankruptcy on issues that had been open for years and no one had ever done anything with them. So we closed a bunch of them to say, let's see what happens with the ones that are actually active, where we're getting things. So you see it's creeping up again. But we try to keep those a little bit manageable, and we need your help with that. So if you filed an issue a long time ago, and it hasn't been addressed yet, and it's still open, you can always just put a comment on there and say, hey, this is still broken. And that will help us to know that that's something that might need attention. If you see something in an issue where you know the answer to the question, or something like that, we encourage people to comment there, because that is an important signal for us to understand what to work on. If there's an issue that's getting a lot of attention, that might suggest that actually it's important to a lot of people. If you file an issue and then never mention it again, we could derive from that the impression that perhaps it's not important to many people. So we don't do a lot of gamification and voting and most popular issue thing, but we notice when an issue is getting traffic. So if there's something out there that's important to you, do let us know. So the past year was fairly moderate in this regard. Only a few issues created, a few of them closed, but some issues are open for a long time and some are short. So this is a visualization that kind of indicates how long it has taken to close things over the year. So basically, what all these squiggles mean is an issue got opened, and then it took a while, and then it got closed. And you see some of these arcs are super long, which means that there were some issues that got closed 10 years later. But all of these arcs that go from all the way over here to all the way over here mean we're still fixing stuff that was that old, right? So we're still noticing. Right? If it's important to people, it does usually get some attention. Now, if you've understood now how this graph works, you also know that all of these things here, they're still not closed, right? So these are issues that someone opened years ago that are still open. But we didn't close them for lack of interest, because apparently something about those issues are still interesting. So let us know which ones are interesting, okay? I saved a little bit of time. It's break time now. So I will say, if you have questions, you're welcome to ask them, but maybe let everyone else go to have the break. I will stick around if you have questions, and I'll be here all day, and I'll be here for the next 2 days of the conference as well. If you have any questions about the documentation, let me know. Any suggestions? We do need people to let us know what works and what you need more information on. So please let us know. Okay? Thank you.